is debugging? Now, I'm not going to have time to spell it all out, but I'll just say that only some kinds of debugging get the reward. And what we're doing is we're using humor as a sort of neuroscientific probe by switching humor on and off, by turning the knob on a joke. Now it's not funny. Oh, now it's funnier. Now we turn a little bit more. Now it's not funny. In this way, we can actually learn something about the architecture of the brain, the functional architecture of the brain. Matthew Hurley is the first author of this. We call it the Hurley model. He's a computer scientist. Reginald Adams is a psychologist, and there I am. And we're putting this together into a book. Thank you very much.
I'll put this up so you can see it, so you can link to it if you like and re-listen to it, or look him up and listen, because of course he's given lectures on this, so that's just a short little advertisement that he did to get people interested in the book. But the basic idea, and Daniel Dennett is a particular favorite of mine. He's done lots of really great stuff over the years. So let me. So these are, I think, in sequence: Brainstorms, Elbow Room, The Mind's Eye with Doug Hofstadter. I think I mentioned him earlier. Most interested in consciousness. So his concern all along has been primarily in consciousness. Consciousness Explained, notice, was one of his major books. Notice that's 92. My favorite book of his is Darwin's Dangerous Idea. It was really quite informative to me about Darwin. One of the early books I read about Darwin and the whole issue that, although if you're interested in the theory of evolution, I think the best book on it is by Stephen Jay Gould, and it's called oh shoot, let me quick check. Yeah, Punctuated Equilibrium is his shoot. The Structure of Evolutionary Theory is his book. Reading that, you come to realize that it's not like there's a theory of evolution. There are, gosh, I guess at least 50 or more theories of evolution, even from before Darwin, of course, and they're all just about how do we interpret change, and especially change with regard to life and things of that sort. So the arguments are not between, is there evolution or not? It's what kinds of evolution are there, really, is more the issue. Even in a sense, say, creation or intelligent design is actually a theory of evolution in a manner of speaking. So the question is how does this stuff happen? And so it's all very interesting. But Dennett was one of the first ones that, reading his Dangerous Idea. I did a presentation on it at Barnes and Noble's once for Darwin Day. which, by the way, you're kind of taking a political side in town when you decide to go to the Darwin Day celebration or the Lincoln Day celebration. They're both, of course, they were both born on the exact same day, so their birthdays are celebrated together. And if you go to the one, you're associating yourself with the more conservative element in town. If you go to the other, you're associating yourself with the more liberal element in town. So be careful which ones you choose to volunteer to speak at. You could end up kind of getting yourself labeled at the same time, even if you don't want to take sides. So kind of interesting. But so Kinds of Minds, another one, Brain Children, Freedom Evolves, Sweet Dreams, Breaking the Spell. It was at this point that he became one of the members of the four so-called horsemen of the apocalypse, or whatever they called themselves: Sam Harris, Daniel Dennett, Richard Dawkins, and Christopher Hitchens, who's dead now, by the way, if you're familiar with him. Of the four of them, by the way, Daniel Dennett, I think, is by far the sanest individual. Richard Dawkins is a great biologist, but when he gets down to religion, he's just really kind of ignorant. Daniel Dennett is pretty brilliant even on that. So his book, Breaking the Spell, I think, is much more sound in talking about it. Neuroscience and Philosophy, Science and Religion. Caught in the Pulpit, very, very interesting. And here's Inside Jokes, Using Humor to Reverse Engineer the Mind. So what he's trying to talk about here, and this is, I think, especially why it ties in so beautifully with logic, is by trying to figure out why we laugh. Why do we enjoy humor? From an evolutionary standpoint, there has to be a reason for it. It's not like a side thing that we just happen to like humor, by the way, but besides that, we're animals that do all this other stuff. No, we're enjoying jokes and things for a reason. So his study of humor is not just an attempt to try to figure out how jokes work, but also to try to figure out how our brains developed that characteristic, why we tell jokes. And notice other animals, I'm sure you've noticed, they seem to laugh. I'm not sure about dogs, maybe, but definitely the other primates definitely laugh. Seems like dolphins do too. I'm not sure. I've not really worked with dolphins at all, except for at Sea Life Center, well, not Sea Life Center because we don't have them here, but at SeaWorld in Orlando and places like that, where if you've participated in one of those horrific events called dolphin petting, it was great. Back in the day, we took our kids and we bought the fish and we gave them and we got to pet the dolphin and everything. And then later on, we read how absolutely horribly those poor animals had been treated in order for that to all work. Participating in a horrific human exercise. But so Inside Jokes is an attempt to apply the theory of evolution to our brains, and by doing so, figure out why it is that we tell jokes. Why are jokes important? Why do we get a reward? Because we enjoy humor. We laugh, and it's a pleasurable experience. And so why do we get these rewards? Why did this develop, right? Well, his basic thesis is that being logical animals, we want to solve problems. So we're involved with a logical situation, and something goes wrong. And when we figure out what goes wrong, we get that reward. Yes, we figured it out. And so that's the reason for the reward was because we solved the problem. Well, if we think of jokes as fallacious reasoning, there's something wrong with it, right? So someone's coming up with an argument about something, and we analyze that argument, and we think, wait a minute, there's something not quite right about this argument, right? And then when we figure it out, we have that reward, mental reward, right? And we share it. We tend to all, laugh. And even my one son, this is actually kind of interesting. My one son has fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. What I've discovered over the years, we've had him tested, and of course, raising him, we adopted him when he was 13 months old, and what we discovered was there were a lot of occasions where he simply did not function adequately mentally, right? I guess you're familiar with it, right? Yes? No? Maybe not? Yes?
Oh, yeah.
Fetal
We talked
alcohol?
about in psychology, so.
Yeah, well, it's serious. There are estimates that we have in the state of Alaska about 25% of our population are affected by fetal alcohol. To some degree, it's a range of problems, and that's why when they test individuals for it, what they're trying to do is see specifically which problems does the individual have, how serious is it, and so on. But say with Christopher, who I love dearly, by the way, and he knows it, and he knows he has it, although his knowing that he has it isn't the same as an adult knowing that he has it, right? Because our understanding of, for example, when he was in high school and he was in special classes because he had this disability, right? He was all thrilled because he figured once he graduated from high school, the disability would be over. It was absolutely startling to us to realize that that's how he thought about it. He thought it was a problem for in school and not that it was a problem for life, right? But when he was young, it was verbal, but at the time he wasn't verbal yet when we first adopted him. It was slow. But I don't know if I told you that we had the 3 kids all lined up, because the one day I came home and my wife was all upset because the TV was broken. One of the kids had touched and broke the TV. And as soon as I saw it, we had a TV that we had bought in Europe and had a PAL switch. If you're familiar with that, because the European method is different than the American standard. So the device we had the switch for electricity to 220, 110, but it also had the PAL switch so that you could switch it from one type of reception to another. And one of the kids had pushed it, and I recognized the pattern. So I knew immediately, as soon as I came home, I solved the problem by pushing the button. Problem solved, the TV was fine. But still, the kids weren't supposed to touch the TV because they were too young. So I lined them up and said, who touched the TV? We're not going to punish them, but still we have to make sure that they know not to touch the TV. Well, my oldest looked at me and said, no, I didn't touch the TV. Honesty in the face, right? No problem. My daughter, oldest daughter, looked at me and said, I didn't touch the TV. Honesty in her face, absolutely clear, she did not. Christopher looked at me and says, I didn't touch the TV. Guilt all over, right? But just to make sure, I said to Christopher, which button didn't you touch? And he pointed right at it, right? And he said, that's the button I didn't touch. Right? And all of you are laughing right now because that's as clear a confession, as you can get, right? And he didn't realize it. And of course, the scary thing for me was, okay, so I thought as much. He's the one that touched it. But at the same time, realization set in that this kid isn't operating on all cylinders. He's going to have trouble. And in fact, he has. He's been in jail. He's had problems with group associations. I mean, you name it. He's taught us what that side of life is like. The problems that you can have with that. Fortunately, he's still alive. He's in his 30s. Has routine jobs that he works for canneries, and he even goes out on the boats. And kind of scary that he's out there, but he survives, does okay. So he's living as good a life, I think, as we could expect him to have, and he does have all the assistance that, you know, all the public services can avail him. But there it is. You know, there's the issue that, you know, if you have that kind of fetal development issue, you can't fix it. We've learned that. There's nothing you can do to install the hardware that's not functioning properly. We can do all sorts of, you know, we did all the stuff with manipulatives, different learning attempts in order to try to help and so on. But the actual damage caused to his synapses by the alcohol when he was in utero is not repairable, at least yet. You know, if they come up with stem cells that they can inject and they'll find the right locate, wow, that would be absolutely great for all those folks. But at the moment, we don't have any inkling of that ever happening. But Christopher doesn't get jokes, nor can he tell jokes, right? So what he does notice, though, is when we tell jokes and everyone else is laughing, he knows to laugh. So that action that we all have when someone laughs at something, we all kind of catch it. Same thing happens with yawning, I guess you've noticed. I don't know why that is. No one, as far as I know, have studied the evolutionary basis for why we yawn. But notice that's, have they? Yes?
They have, and the funny thing is that it also spreads to certain animals, but not a lot of animals. Like,
Yeah.
for instance, dogs specifically, and I want to say apes get it, but not like cats. And supposedly that's because dogs are more
attuned to
people.
Yeah.
Like, but yeah, they have studied a little bit, and I haven't read a bunch on it, but I do know a little. Okay.
I've seen bats, you know, like in some of those videos where the bats literally yawn, you know, and stuff. So it might be something to do with a certain type of mammalian.
And the opposite is also true, which is to say that humans can catch it from other animals, but it's not limited in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, you know, for instance, like you said, a bat yawning.
Although I've not seen us, you know, it's interesting that we might share yawns that way, but I don't think we share humor so much. I feel like dogs can feel insult, though. So, like, if they do something funny, like trip or something, and you laugh at them, I think they feel insulted. But I mean, that could very well be just my, you know, thinking that they would, you know, if somebody saw me trip and then laughed at me, I would feel insulted, or at least, you know, upset. But I don't know if dogs feel that. But so the tie-in then with humor is that since Christopher has fetal alcohol, we've had it measured, and we know that this is the case. I can tell that, you know, if we tell a joke, he doesn't get the joke. He'll laugh, but only because he's responding to other people laughing. In fact, if you catch him when he's laughing, he's looking around almost quizzically at why we're all laughing, because he doesn't really get it. And then when he tries to tell a joke, and occasionally he's tried to do that, joke is terrible. It's not funny. He laughs when he gets to what he considers the punchline, but it's not really been told correctly. I don't know if you've ever heard about the guy that's gone to prison. And the first night, everybody turns the lights out. He starts hearing all these people in all the different bunks yelling, 43, and everybody laughs. 22, and everybody laughs. Have you heard this one?
Yeah.
No? Keep going? So, you know, 46, everybody laughs. So, you know, the next morning he asks his cellmate, he says, so what was that all about? Everybody yelling numbers and everybody laughing. He says, oh, well, you know, once you're here for long enough, you've heard all the jokes that we know. And so instead of telling the whole joke, we just tell the number of the joke. Oh, okay. So the next night, he decides he's going to try it. So when it starts again and everybody's yelling 23, he yells out 42. Dead silence. No one laughs. A couple other people yell out numbers 72, 63, whatever, right? Everybody's laughing. So he yells out 15. Dead silence. Nobody laughs. So he quits. The next morning he asks his cellmate again, what happened when I tried? Some people just can't tell a joke. Not funny. What's wrong with that one, by the way? What fallacy does that one break? At least amphibly. Because when you get to the punchline is some people can't tell a joke, right? So you have a whole phrase, right? And we know what that applies to. In other words, some people can't actually tell the whole joke, right? But here we have a situation where all the guy has to do is yell out the number and everybody's laughing. So saying that some people can't tell a joke when all you have to do is yell out a number between 1 and 100 or something, that's what's silly about that. So we know that what the phrase means, but at the same time, that's such a silly situation. That's not, what we usually mean by telling a joke. So we laugh because there's something wrong with that argument, right? That the reason he had trouble was because he couldn't tell a joke. That can't be it, right? That really wouldn't be the excuse. So there's a logical problem, and we understand what the conclusion is not really the right answer, right? So now this some of you sent me jokes and analyses of your favorite comics and so on, and it was interesting. There was a lot of repetition, but which is interesting all on its own because there's so many out there. Yet at the same time, a couple of you pointed out things in the jokes. One of them, for example, was self-deprecating humor, right? If we think about that, right? So we found that, by the way, to be very safe humor. Because if you're making fun of yourself, that's very safe because you're not insulting someone else, right? Insulting someone else like, ethnic jokes or, things of that sort, that could be politically incorrect, especially in a society that prides itself on its, appreciation for people from all, ethnicities and so on, right? So we're really down on anyone, that does that. Although, by the way, that's traditionally been a real steadfast way of telling jokes from one cultural group to another. Helps establish the clan and things of that sort. But when we think about self-deprecating, is that how you say it? Or depreciating? I'm confused about that. But when you use that, what kind of fallacy are you actually using? I mean, that, I think, was a puzzle to me. And it makes me wonder that not all humor is an example of a fallacious argument. That there might be other things that are simply hilarious. Well, what about slipping on a banana peel? The guy's walking along, argument. If you think of it this way, he's trying to go from A to B. At halfway, he suddenly flies up in the air and lands on his back, which would be absolutely terrible for anybody, by the way, except for trained comics that like the Three Stooges or whatever. However they did it, right? Everyone's seen someone slip on a banana peel. Yes? No? Only two of you? What do you think? Can I find someone slipping on a banana peel? you think? This isn't the Three Stooges. I didn't see one. Interesting. So the one was funny because we were expecting him to fall on it and he didn't. That's interesting. But what makes a banana peel joke hilarious? Or do we not laugh at that anymore? We worry about the person.
I'll laugh.
You would laugh? What if it was your grandmother?
I think she would actually laugh.
She would laugh. You'd have to take her to the hospital.
She'd be laughing along the way.
She'd be laughing. Well, how can we convert that into an argument? I mean, somebody's walking from point A to point B, hits a banana peel, ends up on their back. That's totally unexpected. What argument would that be? Normal walking. You shouldn't fall. All of a sudden you do. That's unexpected.
You should pay attention to the surroundings, I guess.
Yeah, well, we shouldn't throw banana peels on the ground. Do banana peels really even do that? They have to be perfect, right? You have to have it completely on the side so that it will slide, otherwise, I don't know.
It'd be like the perfect storm of coincidence, which is
Yeah,
part of why it's
that
fun.
could be part of why it's funny. And sad. Actually, have you ever laughed and at the same time felt bad for laughing because it, yeah, yep, that happens. You can't help it sometimes, but silly things happen, you know. I remember going to the range once and you know, shooting at my target, and we'd go down to check the targets, and I had so many bullet holes in my target. It was incredible. And the guy said, "Wow, you did a great job." The guy next to me had no bullet holes in his target. It was pretty darn clear what he had done was shot at my target, right? But guess what? They gave me it. They gave it. So I've got, of course, I've finished. He had to go back and, recycle. But I was done. I had, obviously it was unfair. And yes, I'm laughing, right? I'm laughing. The other guy's like, "Wow, I must have shot at your target," so here I am laughing, and he's got to spend a lot more time out there and wait for the next group and the whole business, right? But yep, I laughed, couldn't help myself.
Yeah, but some comics also use ad hominem abusive. Am I saying that right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is funny. I mean, because it makes fun of, inequalities of people, which you yourself may have. So.
Well, I'm wearing a tie tonight. You notice I've been wearing them. Tonight I thought what I ought to do is wear my bright red tie, but it isn't quite long enough. But at the same time, I would have put tape on the back of it, so that. How many of you have seen that? You know what I'm referring to? So, this is the president getting off, I think, of a plane or helicopter or something, and the wind was blowing, and the cameras, of course, are on him, and so everybody can see, right? You can see the tape. Oh, you hadn't heard about that?
No.
I missed
It's
that
pretty
one.
funny, though.
Yeah, but and he always does this, by the way. I've seen him. Notice he never uses a tie clip. Instead, he has this really long tie, and he always puts this double stick tape on it to try to keep it in place. Which, of course, out in the wind never works, as you can see, lots of occasions.
Has he invested in 3M or something?
Well, so we're laughing at this because this is.
Can I flip? I have an adjective for this.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
pathetic.
Pathetic. Okay. Well, the.
He's the best at wearing ties.
So, I'm laughing, and this is an ad hominem. I'm laughing at the man. Literally, right? Now, I don't mean to be abusive at all, actually. I'm sure if I were meeting him and seeing the tape flying on the tie, I would do my best not to laugh. But at the same time, I would feel like it would be abusive if I laughed at him. I can't believe you. What on earth? Can you have? I mean, he's a billionaire. Doesn't he have someone that dresses him that makes sure that this doesn't happen? So that's an ad hominem, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ad hominem, right, literally is Latin for to the man. Ad to or toward, right? So if I'm going ad Philadelphia, I'm heading towards Philadelphia. But we also have ad baculum. Remember the appeal to force, a bat. Baculum is a bat. So if you're threatening somebody, that's an argument ad baculum. Ad hominem. But now where would this be an argument if we use this as our excuse for how I'm not going to listen to him discuss policy? How can you take this guy seriously because he has this tie, with tape, right? Now that's where it becomes an argument, that we shouldn't listen to his policy statements or think of him as a serious man, etc., because he can't even dress himself properly. That's where it becomes an ad hominem. Well, did you get my email this weekend when I went on to the News Corps project, which I've used for years?
Yeah, I remember getting an email about that.
Yeah, so notice this is the warning that comes up, and I took it seriously, and in fact went and read a Wikipedia page about the News Corps project and learned a lot about who set it up, and frankly they were Zionists, so there were anti-Zionists that basically messed with the page and said all sorts of things. So rather than using, I still have it on my links, though I haven't had a chance to go on the main campus and fix my website. So, but warning, don't use it, I guess. But we could just look at fallacies. Wikipedia has a terrific list. Right here. So notice, remember I talked about the formal fallacies last class briefly, that formal fallacies are valid arguments or deductive arguments that you're intending to be valid, but nonetheless fail in being valid or fail in being accurately deductive because of their not being valid. And so those are officially formal fallacies, where you literally have, I think we did one argument, right? I did an IEE 1, I think, or IEE 2. Either one of them, it doesn't matter, either of those are going to, any argument IEE will fail. It's invalid. So you just pick one of those and it will fail. So that's a formal fallacy. But informal fallacies, when we're looking at these, I've never heard of appeal to the stone before. And by the way, I've seen lots of different lists. There are, whole bunches of these lists that people come up with. They're not all the same. Also, the kinds of fallacies that are informal that you find are up to your own interpretation. So it's ambiguous. So I can't say as a testable question, okay, so what fallacy is this? And then say you're wrong because you come up with a different interpretation of what I might feel like some of the choices you make are wrong, but it's still an interpretation, right? So that's why I don't think of fallacies as testable. But the main reason we are concerned about these is because these kinds of arguments are bad arguments. They're not logical, like scientific arguments, but nonetheless, they're persuasive. We're traditionally falling for these arguments. So in a sense, the concern, especially in a logic class with you studying fallacies, informal fallacies especially, is that these are psychologically persuasive, used by people to try to get people to do stuff, but a bad form of reasoning. You should be aware of it so that when people try to use it on you, you don't fall for it, like bait and switch and things of that sort. Be aware, because of course one of the things a college graduate's supposed to be able to do is function much better in the economy and not get taken by other people and so on. And so being aware of fallacious reasoning is an important part of that. I've never heard of appeal to the stone before. Dismissing a claim as absurd without demonstrating proof for its absurdity. I'm not even sure how that came about. That doesn't make sense to me. I suppose I could click on it. But appeal or argument from ignorance. Yeah, this one's pretty. Everyone talks about this one, and that's the idea that you haven't proved that it isn't, right? So sometimes when you have the argument for the existence of God, you can't prove that God doesn't exist. Well, that would be an argument from ignorance, right? It's different, by the way, than the ontological argument, which I know is annoying, but I'm not sure that if you counter that argument with something like the spaghetti monster, the flying spaghetti monster, all right, you can't prove that there isn't a flying spaghetti monster. I imagine in some planet, someplace, there could be a flying spaghetti monster, or something that looks a lot like it. I don't know that it would be a life form, or clearly not a god, but it might look like two meatballs for eyes and a bunch of flying spaghetti. I don't know. But that's not really a counter to the argument from ignorance, I don't think. But the one I always use, we have bears. Everybody knows that. You've probably seen lots of pictures on the internet lately, bears in our neighborhoods and stuff. There were some occasions, though, where people thought, oh, these woods are safe. I could go hiking here without worrying, right? But why? Well, I've never seen a bear there, right? Well, there's your argument from ignorance, right? Because just because you haven't seen a bear there yet, doesn't mean that there isn't going to be one of these times, right? And in fact, we know, you know, the great joke, how many of you have been to the Denali National Park? Have you taken the rangers' little lecture on what to expect, et cetera? One of the things they tell people is that if you're going to go hiking around the park, one of the things they recommend is that you make a lot of noise while you're walking, all right? Because you can't bring weapons and stuff. They want to protect the animals, so they don't want you shooting them. But if you're walking around, they feel that as long as the animals know you're there, they won't mess with you, right? That's their thinking. So what they recommend are things like bear bells and things of that sort. So at one point in their lecture, they always bring up these bear bells. Make sure you bring bear bells or something, and you make a lot of noise so that the animals know you're coming, so they're not caught and startled, and that's when accidents can happen. Later on in the lecture, they're talking about the difference between brown bears and grizzly bears. So if you see scat, right, how can you tell if it's a brown bear or a grizzly bear? And they say, well, the grizzly bear scat has bear bells in it. Well, at that point, of course, everyone laughs because they had that idea of having the bear bells to protect you from startling the bears in their minds all this time. Discovering that, well, how do you tell the difference between the two bears? Because actually the grizzly bears, I guess, brown bears eat people too, right? Right? In fact, all bears do, right? Black bears are supposed to be
Maybe
even.
not koala bears. I could be wrong.
Koala bears, you're right. And
Pretty sure pandas don't
teddy
either.
bears, pandas, probably not. Gosh, what am I thinking? All bears. That was a fallacy right there, right?
Koala bears aren't bears anyway, so.
They're marsupials, correct? So they're not really in the bear family. But oh well. Okay.
Do you want the bear thing in the notes too?
Yeah, I'm very
Can we write
confused about that whole
everything?
thing, the note thing. I would think that I would be a very difficult person to take notes from.
It's people that aren't here. Like,
Right, right.
I can't really write that word.
Right. The other thing too is I usually do try to record the whole thing, but I don't know. But that's a good question. You could write down whatever you want in your notes, whatever you find interesting.
All right.
I'm not going to test you on it though.
Gotcha. And what do you want me to upload this to?
Well, we could discuss that afterwards.
Okay.
Okay. So argument from ignorance. I don't know if we talked incredulity. Appeal to common sense. I cannot imagine how this could be true. Therefore, it must be false. Like today, I read a story. It's called "Waste of Space." It's actually kind of a terrible story. How did it go? So, waste of space. The one line I liked in it was that hope is the thing with the doorway. It's a pun on hope is the thing with feathers. You're familiar? That's Emily Dickinson. Yeah. But so, by the way, I give all my reviews 5 stars, because if I give them less, they give my review a bad review. So there's a whole nother issue over all of that. But so waste of space. It's really for kids, but the story was about these kids that were asked to be the 10 stars in a new TV show. It's titled Waste of Space, and what's supposed to be is these teenagers are all astronauts. They're basically sent out into space in this like capsule that they're going to live in, and then there's cameras on every room watching them, as they go about their just daily business and everything. Trouble happens. You're not going to read it, right? No one's going to read it. So trouble happens that at the end turns out that they're not really in space, but it's not really fake either. They're actually in like a wormhole or something, and one of the girls ends up not being able to come back. She disappears, and so on. So it ends kind of with a surprise. Totally unbelievable. Totally unbelievable. But that doesn't mean that it couldn't happen. There's a lot of movies out there that, like Interstellar. Anybody see that?
That's a really good movie, in my opinion.
Good movie. Unfortunately, totally unbelievable. Right? But the thing is, just because it's unbelievable doesn't mean that it cannot actually be true. Like I remember Einstein, spooky action at a distance, right? It's totally unbelievable. Well, now, how many experiments have demonstrated that it's true, right? So it certainly seems incredible, but just because it's incredible doesn't mean that it couldn't also be true. So that's a fallacious argument. As you can see, there's tons of these. I've adopted a different way of putting this camera while I'm lecturing, because what I've noticed is that it's just staring at my gut the whole time, which is really kind of embarrassing. I'm fatter than you don't feel as fat as you look.
Well, the camera adds 10 pounds.
Well, I don't know. So, argument from repetition. This happens. Hitler used to do this all the time. Ich bin der Führer, ein Volk, ein Führer, etc. Right? So it's circular reasoning essentially, but he just kept saying it over and over again. The idea that if you say it often enough, everybody starts to believe it. If you're looking at the issue over alternate facts right now, there's just a big article in the paper the other day about some blogger, I think it was, that basically said that Comey said that there was nothing being. Oh shoot! I can't remember the whole thing. Let me check. New York Times. It was yesterday, though. Yeah, it was yesterday's. Maybe it's down in frequently read something or other. Nope, I don't see it anyplace. Well, so basically, though, what happened was the blogger said something that was false, but it got picked up and repeated by so many different people that millions are all absolutely convinced that this happened, even though it was a statement of what Comey said at the one session, and he didn't say it. So it's basically a situation where, because it gets repeated, people believe that it was true, even though they're not checking the actual original situation. Argument from silence. I've never heard that one either. Moderation. Begging the question. So this one's very popular. Petito principi, or begging the question. Problem, though, with this one is if you read it in the fullest sense, all deductive arguments are begging the question, because if your argument is successfully valid, that means that the premises contain everything that's in the conclusion. In other words, you're just saying the same thing over again. So that's very, very frustrating, because basically it means that when we analyze our arguments, we end up having no good way to argue. you're being a good scientist and you're coming up with hypotheses. They're just guesses. And so you could be wrong. If it's a deductive argument, that's good and solid, but at the same time, you're not giving us anything new. You're just stating the same thing over and over again. So very frustrating in this way of looking at human reasoning ability. It seems like we just can't come up with good, solid information. And yet at the same time, it seems pretty obvious we've got an awful lot of progress going on, especially in my lifetime. So it looks like the same thing as circular reasoning. So equivocation is what we also mean when we say that we're making a pun. So my favorite joke, why do little baby ducks walk softly? Well, this might actually be amphibole, because little baby ducks can't walk hardly, right? So I'm punning on hard and soft, right? You know, that's, you like the really silly jokes. You like the
That's a simple mind.
last week you liked the other one. It was pretty silly. Sorry about that, but okay. Did I tell you what happened the time I ran over the squirrel? This was really a shame because I was coming home. I was late. It was a winding road, forest, and as I wasn't a squirrel, it was a rabbit. I was driving along and I saw this rabbit darting off from the right side. Impulse, I swerved to the left to avoid it. And of course, that means I hit it over on the left lane, right? Talk about feeling stupid, right? So I got out and I'm looking at this poor rabbit, tire tracks right over it, dead, right? Wondering what to do. You don't want to leave it in the middle of the road. Well, a car pulls up behind me and a lady gets out and comes over and sees what happened. She says, I might be able to help. So she goes back to her car, and when she comes back, she's got a spray can. She starts spraying and spraying and spraying, and the rabbit sits up and looks at us and goes like this, right? And then it hops a little bit and turns and goes like this. And it hops still further and it turns and goes like this. And then hops off to the edge of the woods, turns one last time, goes like this, and then hops off into the woods. I said, what on earth did you do? And she showed me the can. It was hairspray. Revives dead hair, creates permanent wave.
That was so bad.
That one's going in the nose.
That was, yeah, but
That's a bad one.
I mean, it's great, but it's bad. You know, it's how you measure puns. It's how bad they are.
Well, yeah. If you think about it, it's bad because that is a poor argument, right? You know, that's clearly not going to happen. So that's kind of, but so on the one hand we've got puns, which are equivocation. Equivocation is where you're taking the same voc, right, and you're equivoc. You know, you're making the same sound, but the meaning is different in the two different places, right? So in a sense, if we're saying, okay, we've got an argument, right? So here's the premise, here's the conclusion, and here's the word that I used up here, right? Well, in the premise, the meaning of the word was different than in the conclusion. So in a sense, I've got an extra term in my argument, and that's why it's fallacious, right? You might feel like you're going, oh, I know what you did there, right? You know, reward, because I've got, you know, my brain solved the puzzle that you created, right? So I'm glad that I'm laughing at your joke, right? But at the same time, we might feel like that was so blatantly bad. Why on earth did you do that to us? Okay. Etymological fallacy. A lot of these, fallacy of accent. You know, Now that could be, I'm thinking of, hey, is that when, what do they call it if you're at a hospital and you get a shot? It's a hypodermic needle, right? And so what I heard years ago when I was a kid was hypodermic nurdle, right? And that's courtesy of a comedian who said that, and ever since, when I think of those, I think of them as hypodermic nurdles instead, which is totally wrong. Is that a fallacy of accent, or is that something else? Okay, so here we go. These two are important. Fallacy of composition. Assuming that something true of part of a whole must also be true of the whole. So, there's a great musician, he's a great musician, and she's a great musician, and she's a great, and you put them all together, you think, wow, all these great musicians, this orchestra is going to be fantastic. And they start to play, and it's horrible, right? So what did I do? I made the fallacy of composition, and thinking that because they were all good, that the orchestra was going to be good. Of course, it could hopefully just be a matter of they need more practice together, right? Can't just all suddenly put them together. I think, if you saw how YouTube collected a whole bunch of individuals playing music, and then they compiled it all into one great big hundreds worth of, it was awful. So you can't, just because you have all these individuals that are good, you can't put them all together and expect it to be good. The opposite also works, fallacy of division. So just because it's a great orchestra, oh, you play in the orchestra? Oh, you must be a great violinist. And then the person starts to play and you realize, oh, no, that person isn't great just because the orchestra is great. Third chair, relatively new, maybe, got a few years of practicing yet before they become a soloist, right? Do you play the violin?
No, I play the cello.
The cello? I hope you don't mind me saying it, but I think it's the sexiest instrument there is. Because if you've ever seen, especially when you see a guy playing it, Zool Bailey is fantastic, but when you see a woman playing those, it's like, whoa, she loves that cello. Sorry. It's just true. And I'm old enough I can say what I want without worrying about, hey, if you fire me, I'm fired anyway, actually. Retired. But it's just, I love it. I think it's a great instrument. There's, I'll play you this. I know it's not a cello. I don't know what it is, actually. And this, by the way, is a great, where is it? Here we go. So this is, they're actually playing in the hall where this piece was first performed for the king. I thought I could. I don't know what that is, that instrument. Now, so, is this a cello, or is this an older variant? Cello. Looks like a regular cello. These are period instruments from 1640, 1650. How many of you feel like that kind of singing is absolutely irritating? It bothers the heck out of my wife. She can't stand it. You know, where the woman's doing all that.
Wait for the audience, man.
Pardon?
Nothing.
Okay. So let me read a few jokes from his book, and I'll point out too that the way he arranges chapters is, of course, trying to figure out different types of humor, theories about humor, phenomenology. This is Duquesne laughter, humor as a property of objects or events. I wondered why the frisbee. You probably heard this one. I wondered why the frisbee was getting bigger, and then it hit me. I wonder why the frisbee was getting bigger, and then it hit me. It's getting bigger. Yeah. If you tell a joke in the forest and nobody laughs, was it a joke?
Well, it's still a joke. Doesn't matter if someone heals it or not. It's still a joke.
Have you ever heard the question, if a tree falls in the forest
Yeah.
and there's no one there to hear it, does it make a sound? And then there's further work on that same theory where you hear the line, if a man gives an argument and there's no woman there to hear it, is he still wrong? Right? You've heard that one, right? Right? So when you hear this, such and such happens in the forest, is you're tuned in to all of these other examples of that same thing, right? And that was, by the way, Steve Wright. Steve Wright? Familiar with Steve Wright? Steve Wright? No? He's hilarious. We do Steve Wright for you.
Driving down the street past the gas station, there are two signs in the window, help wanted, self-service. So I went in and hired myself. So I get out of the bed, I figured I'd go for a walk. She said, how long are you going to be gone? I said, the whole time. When I was out in the middle of the desert, a UFO landed. 3 1-inch tall guys got out. They walked over to me. He said, are you really 1 inch tall? They said, no, we're really very far away. I remember the day the candle shop burned down. Everybody just stood around and sang happy birthday. So I get off the plane and I forgot to undo my seatbelt and I'm pulling the plane through the terminal. Wow. And the wings are knocking people over. And then I almost broke both my arms trying to hold open a revolving door for a woman. And I headed for the highway and began hitching. Within 3 minutes, I got picked up by one of those huge trailer trucks carrying 20 brand new cars. Climbed up the side of the cab, and he opened the door, and the guy said, I don't have much room in here. I want to get in one of the cars in the back. So I did. He was really into picking up people because he picked up 19 more. We all had our own cars. And he went 90 miles an hour. We all got speeding tickets. I was cesarean born. You can't really tell. Although, whenever I leave a house, I go out through the window. I had a dream. I had a dream that all the babies prevented by the pill showed up. said, Stephen, come over here. And I said, what do you mean? She said, you know, you're over there. Now come over here. I said, all right. And she said, here's $10, and don't tell your mother that I'm giving this to you. And I said, it'll cost you more than that. I got a new dog. He's a paranoid retriever.
Paranoid retriever.
He brings back everything because he's not sure what I throw him. One time, right in the middle of a job interview, I took out a book and I started reading. The guy said, what the hell are you doing? I said, let me ask you one question. If you were in a vehicle and you were traveling at the speed of light, and then you turned your lights on, would they do anything? He said, I don't know. I said, forget it, then I don't want to work for you. My theory of evolution is that Darwin was adopted. I was 5 years old watching TV. Only you can prevent forest fires. Oh no. Every night out the window with a bucket of water. The ice cream truck in my neighborhood plays Helter Skelter. One time I went to a drive-in in a cab. The movie cost me $95. I've been arrested several times. I can't wait to be arrested and go all the way to the witness stand. If you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Yes, you're ugly. Woman in the jury, I'd really like to sleep with her. Should I keep going, or are you going to ask me questions? If you shoot a mime, should you use a silencer?
If you shoot a what?
Mime.
My grandmother was also insane. She had pierced hearing aids. Unscented perfume. Came in a little empty bottle. I tried to hang myself with bungee cord. Kept almost dying. And then I went into a store and I tried to buy something to put underneath the coasters. My uncle was a clown for Ringling Brothers Circus. And when he died, all his friends went to the funeral in one car. I'm going to court next week. I have been selected for jury duty. It's kind of an insane case. 6,000 ants dressed up as rice and robbed a Chinese restaurant.
So, was he describing a situation of logical and apparent equivalence when in fact there is none? Or is he using just one particular pattern over and over again? Interesting. Not sure.
Questions.
Pardon?
So he does ask a lot of questions.
He does ask a lot of questions. But he's leading you astray with the question too.
Yes, he is.
So I was thinking false equivalence. One of you gave me the link to Robin Williams' Creation of Golf, I think, and gosh, I have personal sad story associated with that. I really loved it. My dad really loved golf. And we set up the internet so that I could play it for him when we were visiting his house one time. And it started, and the trouble was he hates bad words. So he did not appreciate it. So it went over like a lead balloon, and very quickly. So that's a shame. But believe it or not, Robin Williams can be very funny and clean, or he could. He's obviously not going to be very funny any longer, because we lost him. However, and he didn't use bungee cords. That's bad. That's bad. Okay. Let me do a few more jokes from his book. And then we'll quit for now, I guess. I want to get on to the next. Let's see. You tickle my fancy and I'll tickle yours. These are boundary cases. Be careful, some of these are sexual and I don't want to get in trouble. You've outdone yourself as usual. I don't get it. When I was growing up, we had a petting zoo. And well, we had two sections, a petting zoo and a heavy petting zoo for people who really liked animals a lot. That was Ellen DeGeneres. I can imagine her going over with that. She used one line at a graduation speech at Louisiana State University, LSU. She was hilarious, actually. But one of the things she did, she came out and she said, "Greetings, distinguished guests, undistinguished guests." And she just left it there, and then she said, "You know who you are." And that's when everybody laughed. Well, I stole that one at a graduation speech and discovered that they will not laugh when you just say undistinguished guests. You have to follow through with the "you know who you are," or they won't laugh. And then if you do follow that, then they will laugh. So that was pretty interesting. Knowledge relativity. A sax player dies and goes to the pearly gates. St. Peter says, "Sorry, too much partying, you have to go to the other place." The elevator doors open and he goes into a huge bar. All the greatest are on stage on a break. Satchmo, Count Basie, Miles Davis. Goes over to Charlie Parker and says, "Hey, this can't be hell, all the best are playing here." Charlie says, "Hey man, Karen Carpenter is on drums."
Is he a bad drummer?
She must be a bad drummer. So the whole thing is all going to be screwed up. It's going to be hell.
I think it's more logical to assume that she wasn't a bad drummer so much as she was a good something else. I think that's where they were going with the joke.
Could be.
Because if you've got all the different, like, the greatest blah, greatest everybody, then obviously it follows.
But she's not good at drumming, but she is good at something else.
Yeah.
But that she's forced to do drumming.
Pretty much.
Why would they put her on the drums though? She was so terrible.
Because they didn't have
Because it's
anybody else to be
hell.
on the drums.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, anyway.
All right, let me try this. This will be something.
Mental gymnastics.
I get what you're saying.
Okay. So how about logic when it comes to music? I think I mentioned in the first class that I think mathematics certainly applies to music. Can you tell a mathematical or musical joke? Right. So. Oh, what's her name? Okay, so just enough for you to get used to the melody, right? So it's a waltz. Here's the end of it. That was a musical joke, because that's not how that should end. So So that was off, right? So. Did you catch that? You're a musician? Does that sound odd to you? So there are musical jokes. Of course, there's also blatantly, obviously,
And they're off with a four-note theme. I don't know whether it's slow or fast because it keeps stopping, folks. Doesn't seem to be able to get off the ground. But it does look like we're coming up to a cadence here. Now, the violins didn't cut off. They weren't watching. Surprised they weren't called for holding. There's that four-note theme again and another stop. Just cannot seem to get this off the ground. Tell me, Giff, do you think you would call that four-note idea a theme or a motif?
Well, Pete, the technical term would be a motif that he uses to build a theme.
Thanks for setting me straight on that, Giff. Okay, we're heading into the second theme section here. We can be looking for a little modulation.
so that Peter Schickli, it's got skit after skit after skit that makes fun of classical music. So people that like classical music, they listen. Like Schumann has a symphony called the Unfinished Symphony. Is it Schumann or Schubert? Schubert? Sorry, I'm going to pick on her now because she plays the cello. Sorry. But so Schumann, one of them, has the Unfinished Symphony. I think it's his 7th. He died. You know how that works, right? So he didn't finish that one. Famous symphony, though. I'll play it for you. Schubert. So it's Schubert. You'll recognize it. Who's playing this? Can you hear it? Sounds a lot like Beethoven, by the way, to me. You notice you can learn the various composers so that even if you've never heard a piece before by a certain composer, you recognize that that's that composer. So you're listening to kind of an algorithm that's typical of that composer. You can recognize the algorithm even though you've never heard it. You'll recognize this. This is the main melody here. Heard it before? So Peter Schickli, to continue the idea though, wrote a piece that's hilarious. It's called the Unbegun Symphony. So instead of the unfinished, it's the Unbegun Symphony. Okay, so this one. Okay, so I'm not going to play all 9 minutes of it, but let me see if I can.
Well,
So they give the emperor a new piece of music that Antonio Salieri has written for the emperor. And he doesn't play very well, so he's learning how to play the piece.
Delightful call composer. May I play when he comes in?
You're doing too much on his side.
Bring in Herr Mozart, please. But slowly.
So in comes Mozart
Right.
for his first visit, as an adult, actually. This is the movie Amadeus.
See? Good, continue. G. Excellent. Very good. Very good, Majesty. Tempo. Lightly, then strongly. The march, just the march. Again.
He has no clue who the emperor is. What do you think of the melody, by the way?
See, the Emperor's probably not playing it very well.
Playing
It's
solo
not
tenor.
very
It's track.
Yes.
Yes, and all that
Bravo,
stuff.
Majesty. I don't think the Emperor actually knows how to play it. It's supposed to be a lot faster.
Majesty. No, please, please. It's not a holy relic.
They were really into holy relics, by the way, at the time.
In this very room. Perhaps you don't remember it, you were only 6 years old. He was giving the most delightful concert here. As he got off the stage, he slipped and fell. My own sister Antoinette helped him up, and you know he did. He jumped into her arms and said, "Will you marry me, yes or no?" You know.
How many of you have seen this before?
Baron Van Sweeten.
I'm a great admirer of yours, I
Thank you. Kapellmeister Bono. Figlioli. My pleasure. The director of our opera, Count Orsini Rosenberg.
Okay, I'm going further.
Tell us about it. Tell us the story.
Yes, exactly. Then why especially does it have to be? To actually show concubines exposing the...
Tell him, Mozart. Name us a German virgin.
all those male sopranos screeching.
This is yours.
Keep it, Majesty, if you want. It's already in my head.
What? From one hearing only?
I think so, sire. Yes.
So here goes.
Show us.
So you just heard it being played, of course, by the emperor, and that was it.
The rest is just the same, isn't it?
Insult? He wasn't very astute.
You were a visit. Did you try? Shouldn't it be a bit more? Or this? This? Yes. Better? What do you think?
Now it's a recognizable melody, right? And in fact, it's appealing. And of course, Salieri Salieri is insulted to the max because he's rewritten his piece and meet it right there on the spot.
The joke.
Grazie, signore.
He's pissed. But so here's what's interesting about this. Salieri's written a piece. Mozart recognizes what we might call a mathematical pattern associated with it, and recognized that Salieri hasn't actually solved the mathematical puzzle in the piece, and so he corrects it. So he makes a much better piece out of the raw material of the melody that Salieri has created, right? So what we've gone is from a poorly written piece to a better piece. So if we ask the question, is there a best music? What would be your normal answer? What would be your answer? Is some music better than others?
Yes.
Yeah.
Say yes.
Yeah.
Yes? Does everybody agree? But yet you've heard the expression, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. We would also convert that to music. Say beauty's in the ear of the beholder, right? But can you see that that's actually wrong? There is ugly. It does exist. By the way, that's politically incorrect, isn't it, in our society? Say that something is better than another. Well, I mean, you know, if you're shooting at something, hitting it is better than, you know, so it's obviously hilarious that I ended up with over 50 rounds in my target. I only had 50 rounds to start with, right? The guy next to me has no rounds in his target. He was obviously shooting at my target as well as I was. That's hilarious, right? But obviously you want to hit your target. That's better than missing. But when we talk about music and other things like that, it seems to me that we have a cultural preference for arguing that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, so what you like might not be what she likes. And in fact, I can almost guarantee that that's the case, right? What's your favorite painting?
Mine's the Night Owl.
The one by, shoot, I can't think of his name.
I can't remember.
The Scream? You mean The Scream?
No, the Night Owl. It's a painting of a woman. She has a
Oh, with the creature
demon
on her?
on her.
The demon on her?
Yeah. The succubus or whatever it was. And it has like a
You have
horse
a
in the
favorite painting?
background.
No favorite painting?
I don't know what it's called.
Ah, but you do have one. It comes to your
I
mind.
guess since I took art appreciation, I found one.
Yes. Favorite?
Birth of Venus.
I have that in my office. The original? No. Actually, I just found it on the internet, hit print, put it in a frame. But favorite music? What's your favorite music?
Nice country. Country music. For me.
Country music?
Mhm.
Yeah, we're talking like genre or like a song? Or...
Wow, that's an interesting part of the question, actually. I mean, what Salieri did was a fallacious musical joke, in a sense, and Mozart fixed it. So
Yeah.
that's really, and we could do that. You could take Beethoven and you could screw it up. The John Williams Aunt Marge's waltz is a musical joke at the end. And by the way, it fits beautifully with the scene if you're familiar with, what was it, Esteban, right? I forget. But what I'm suggesting is that mathematical patterns are part of the same picture, that we recognize fallacious reasoning and consider it a problem, whether it's music, whether it's painting. If we see a painting, we feel like, oh, there's something wrong with that. We'd probably be able to analyze it in art class and figure out what's the deal here? Why is this painting better than this one? Literature, you know, Harold Bloom does the same thing with stories, right? Tries to figure out, oh, this story is crap, this is great. And like, you're like, what? You know, I actually like J.K. Rowling. He calls J.K. Rowling's stories crap. By the way, it's not my fault, he just does, right? And, you know, I happen to like the story, they were great. But I've noticed over the years, you know what? People aren't reading them as much, whereas they still read classics. So basically what he's saying is there's a certain progressive point at which a particular author has created something new, that now that author and that particular piece, like Hamlet, will be famous forever, right, because of what it accomplished. J.K. Rowling's not going to be part of that picture, he says. So again, you've got the same, you know, something's happening in the type of story that is new, exciting, and different, that has never been done that way before, and we like it. And it will stay, you know, a significant element in our literature or history and so on. Same, you can think about it with anything, I suppose. Inventions.
So there's movies about, you know, J.K. Rowling's books. Saying he's pretty famous.
Oh, yeah, she's still famous.
I was thinking Tolkien for a second, wondering what that version.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the movies are gonna be like remade or anything. Who knows?
Sure they
Should
will.
be interesting.
Oh, yeah, give it a
time.
couple decades.
Yeah.
Right now, we've got the whole new series that she's producing,
Yeah.
which.
Is it fairies?
The Curse.
No.
The Fantastic Beasts and how to find them or where to find them. But it-
Oh, it's crap.
yeah, that's the interesting thing, you know, wow, that's gone over like a lead balloon, right? All the hype and everything, and then it's like, nobody goes back and watches it over and over again. And of course the play, no, it's not.
Yeah, it's a play. It's the Curse of
It's a
Shroud.
text, right?
Well, it's a play.
It's a screen.
It is a play. It's just they haven't actually. I don't think anyone's actually played it. It's just a script for a
I
play.
hated it.
I didn't read
I
it.
haven't seen the play, but I've read the book, and I did not like it, because it was like, it ruined the old series, because it goes back into time and screws up what happened in the earlier books, so it's kind of annoying.
Well, it wasn't written by her.
Pardon?
It wasn't written by J.K. Rowling, so.
It's a consortium of individuals that put it together, I guess. Okay, well, let's take a break, and we'll come back, and we're gonna start our next chapter. We're gonna do Aristotelian statements, which this is really an important section, so. If you have any questions on the first test, I don't think you do, but if you do, let me know.
That's due next week, right?
Right.
Next Monday.
Right, by midnight, I said.
On Monday.
Right. But if you're late, that's okay. But remember, it's just 900 words.
Just
900 words.
And people still fail your class.
They do, and it's mostly because like they don't show up.
Or they don't show up.
You know, I don't understand why that happens, but it does.